Hi, Sandra. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today. I'm really grateful for this opportunity to get to know you as a person and your experiences and ideas and perspectives. So, thank you.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here.
Yeah. So, to open up this conversation, I was scrolling through your tweets earlier, and I'd love to read one that feels really resonated with me as a way to sort of start chatting here. So, I will read it to you. I'm isolating this from a longer thread, but this tweet in particular really stuck out to me. On August 18th, 2024, you tweeted, all this reconnects me with a sense I've had recently that after hosting women's groups and circles in the past year, the next step is to create spaces where men and women can come together, witness each other's gender specific pain, and unlock more vulnerability and connection. And when I read that, I was like, oh, that's what I've been doing with these conversations. Not just in my case, witnessing women's pain, but their joy and experiences and curiosity and euphoria and mystery and revelation and all these things that fascinate me as far as my like interest in like gender experiences and polarity. And so yeah, I'm glad to read that from you, and I'm looking forward for me as an intention just to witness for you, as a woman, just your everything, your stories, your pain, your celebration, your questions. Uh, because I see a lot of kind of divisiveness, and I contribute to this at times online, like ways men and women sort of snipe at each other and are not open to understanding. And I want to, through this podcast, help uh, facilitate the conversations around gender that I want to see in the world. So all that's my intention here, and I'd love to hear how that sits with you, as well as your intention for this conversation.
Mm. It's really interesting to hear my own tweet read back to me. I have not
I,
had that experience before.
you might
Yeah.
you might have that
And
experience again in the next few hours.
I'm also just like quite surprised, but positively surprised by the tweet you picked because this is something that's very alive for me right now. This is just from last week. And yeah, and I think there's like maybe an intention that I was coming in with, which is a desire to be asked some questions about what like this idea of womanhood, femininity means to me. I've been like really kind of exploring that for myself over the past 5 years. And yeah, and I think that there's like a really interesting kind of a possibility of seeing myself from the outside a bit more, seeing like the blind spots as well, and seeing like unearthing some new knowledge as well that maybe is here but just haven't been probed. So that's something that was really interesting to me. And I think right now, as we're here, I'm just like re feeling into the intention. And I think it is something like really wanting to be present with like the present with my experience and with you and to to sort of explore like what's like what's honest, like what's real for me around here. I think that's what I'm drawn to.
Mm, yeah, it's a beautiful share. Um, yeah, honesty, presence. For me, attunement more recently has been a pretty alive concept here.
Mm.
Like, are we attuned to each other? Do we like, am I actually hearing you, not just hearing, but understanding what you're sharing? And like, are the things you're sharing, do I receive the same thing that you're saying? Like sometimes there's a disconnect, it's like someone says a word, but someone else interprets it totally differently. So I think attunement is a way to, have in our case the two conversation participants just be aligned on what's being shared and have mutual understanding.
Yeah.
hmm. Okay. Thank you for sharing all that. Um, yeah, I've struggled with this first question because I want to go like broad and know like what has informed your understanding of womanhood, but that can feel like too big. So I probably want to ask like just right now, currently in your life, what feels alive for you as far as understanding and embodying like womanhood and femininity?
Yeah. I think that's a great start. And the first things that come up is just right before this call, I was wondering, am I getting my period? And because I was just feeling like a little bit of cramps, and I know it's gonna kind of come in the next days, and I just noticed that, oh, there's this concern. Like, there's a thing I want to do. I want to have this interview. And then there's like where my body is at. And
Hmm.
is it ready for this effort? Is this what it wants to experience right now? It includes sitting in a chair and like not really moving for a while. And yeah, and I just think that arises as like a very first answer. Oh, yeah, there's like a thing that happens to a woman all month, basically. There's like shifts and changes in how my body is working. Um, so I think that's a thing that's very alive. And I've been sort of studying my body quite a lot more in the past 2 years than ever before. Um, and yeah, and I think the other thing is like immediately I'm zooming out on my relational field and both like relationships with other women and relationships with men. And there's like some themes that I'm exploring there. Something like surrender, um, and um, care, um, and yeah, vulnerability. I think those are just like some themes that seem to put me in touch with what I'm going to call the feminine quality, which doesn't seem gendered. It's like a quality that I sense that I sometimes feel into and sometimes I don't. So when it's present, I sort of notice it, and I think there's a way in which I felt disconnected from it from quite a long time. So I've been like noticing things that shift me into that quality. Um, and yeah, I kind of noticed a desire to slow down a little bit. Um,
Hmm.
Maybe I'm just curious actually to pause. Maybe there's already something here.
Yeah, as far as your answer, there's like so much to dive into there. Thank you for sharing all that. Yeah, I'd love to know around first thing you mentioned there around your cycle and listening to your body. I'd love to know like what is your how to phrase this, like process, or what does that look like and feel like for you? Like how do you sit with your body and receive messages from it around, what does or doesn't feel right in a given moment?
Mm. Hmm. I think this is a yeah. I think this is like a quite a tricky place. Um, like I noticed both. I think I have something to share because I guess I've been trying to practice this for some time now, and at the same time, there's still this very strong sense of like it's hard. Like I still end up, sort of getting myself to an edge of burnout and sort of like working until I'm like super contracted. And then I'm like, wow, like what did I miss? Like where did I miss the signals? And so I think that's like an ongoing, it feels like an ongoing challenge. But I think things that have been really helpful recently is lying on the floor.
Hmm.
Like there's something really interesting that happens when I just shift to horizontal. Um, and rolling from side to side, or like rolling my hips, and kind of there's these like little exercises where you can just like shift your neck side to side and like look on the ceiling that apparently like regulates the vagus nerve, um, and sort of puts you in the state of like a little bit more calm and safety. um, and I think that's kind of what I feel like this work needs. Like, how can I get myself to a place of a little bit more like safety and slowness
Hmm.
and just like being here right now without anything to do. Um,
Hmm.
and from that place, I think it's easier to like notice some subtleties in my experience. And sometimes like emotions come and they always have like a kind of a message, it seems like, at the end of the emotion, if I like let it pass. Um, and so I feel like, yes, I feel like it's more about like creating an environment or like an internal state that is attuned to me or to my body, and then just listen. Um, yeah. So I had an interesting experience yesterday, maybe that I can quote, where
Yeah.
I was doing one of these. I was like very agitated. I woke up super agitated, sad, kind of tired. And then I was like, all right, maybe I could do one of these like exercises. And so they usually say, you should turn your head to the right, look on the ceiling, and just like hold for 30 seconds, and then you're gonna get a yawn or something. And so I was just sitting and I was doing this exercise, and nothing was coming for like 30 seconds, a minute. I was like, oh, am I doing it wrong? But then there was this little voice that was like, no, just like wait, like maybe you actually need a few minutes, to shift down. And then, yeah, like at some point, I don't know, 3 minutes in or something, there were some little tears that came. And then there was like a slight shift in my system. And I was like, wow, okay, I'm glad I trusted it long enough. But there's this desire to sort of like either like skip through it, be faster, or blame myself for not doing it right. So there's something here about like trusting that there will be an answer at the end if I just stay with it and believe in it. Um, yeah, there's something about believing in my body, I think, that I've been
Hmm.
trying to learn or like
Hmm.
feel as true.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like when you prioritize like giving your body like the microphone, so to speak, like not like letting go of other external activities and distractions and just giving your body space and time to experience and share something with you if it wants to. That's where the magic seems to happen. Sounds like.
Yeah.
Hmm. Ah.
I'm actually really enjoying seeing you do your stretches and stuff because like that very much feels like listening. That there's something there, something that
Yeah.
wants to be witnessed.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I've been learning about for myself how to pretty effortlessly be more embodied in the past year or so, and yeah, it just feels good to like remember, just as you said, like remember, oh yeah, I have a body and like I can kind of take a pause from like being in this like maybe contracted awareness state of whatever activity I'm engaged in, just like roll my shoulders or exhale or whatever my body wants to do.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hmm.
You know
Because
what? Actually, this is kind of interesting.
yeah.
Yeah, like if I may just add, because I've recently been pondering this. I mean, obviously, like not everyone who identifies as a woman has a menstrual cycle and has a uterus, but like for the, let's say, like the traditional sense of like what we mean when we say a woman body, um, there is a way in which like having menstruation every month, you kind of can't ignore the fact that you have a body. Like it's harder to
Mhm.
ignore your body when you have this like very raw process, like rolling through you every month. But it's also fascinating to me that I feel like for 10 or 15 years of since I started menstruating until recently, really like 2-3 years ago, I sort of also didn't notice it in a way. And
Wow.
now it's just like really, really visible to me. But there's a way in which like both like no one really taught me the little like nuances and subtleties of each of the 4 phases of the month, really, of the monthly cycle. So that's one thing. The other thing is like when you do get your period, or at least for me, and I think for many women, there's the sense that, well, okay, you kind of don't talk about it, you hide it, you kind of hate it, like you take painkillers. So there's like all these kind of forces to just like make it not exist. Um, and yeah, and I think when you actually like start being with it, it helps with this process of like not ignoring the fact that you have a body is what I noticed.
Hmm. Yeah, I wonder if there's some effect there where like someone ignores their menstrual cycle, it like demands attention, so it'll this is a speculation, of course, but they'll just like be louder and more aggressive or painful or whatever happens to get your attention and
Yeah.
be taken care of.
Yeah.
Yeah. I wonder, you mentioned like 2 or 3 years ago, there was a shift where it sounded like you kind of lacked awareness around your menstrual cycle to becoming more aware of it. What shifted?
Yeah. Um, I guess that's where we get to the more difficult parts. Because yeah, for the past like 4, maybe a little bit more actually years, um, I've been having very, very painful menstruations, and it sort of happened out of nowhere, and really took me by surprise. And you know, and it's funny that you mentioned that maybe when you ignore it, it sort of like asks for your attention. I don't know if that's true, you know, in the objective sense, but it is a story that, like, one of the stories that I hold about my experience, where there's just something that like really wanted to be looked at, and yeah, and there's a lot of ways to pathologize that experience as well. You know, there's like medical conditions like endometriosis, and there's also ways to see it more as a, you know, your body's like way of like trying to heal by drawing your attention to the fact that, you
Mm-hmm.
know, you exist in this particular body. And so I've been finding quite a lot of meaning out of trying on that more wholesome story, rather than the kind of medical story. But I think this is also like a constant battle for me of like, when is a thing that's happening intense enough that actually it requires medical attention, and
Mm-hmm.
where is it just like a signal that really needs some like love and attention and care. So I think that's like one big question mark for me. And I know that there's other women in my life, especially with like autoimmune conditions or some kind of like reproductive like, conditions, where it's actually unclear how to be with that if you are also a person who's like trying to have a healthy relationship with their body. Um, so I'm just gonna like bookmark this as like a big sort of area where I don't feel like I have the answers and I'm kind of challenged myself. But yeah,
Mm-hmm.
but the thing that happened these few years ago was basically this like sudden occurrence of this like debilitating pain once a month, and just this question of like what is going on, like why, um, and then yeah, and then exploring from there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you mentioned it still being kind of an active, open question for you, but have you made any inroads or progress even understanding like, oh, this isn't what's happening here? Like, have you made any kind of yeah, inroads towards some sort of a inkling of an answer there?
Yeah. Um, I guess I don't want to speak with total certainty, but something that I have observed is that my experience of my menstruation has become much more like manageable, and sometimes even quite spiritually meaningful when I started relating to it as a more as like a signal, more as like an invitation to like really slow down and take care of myself. Um, like I have also gotten quite a lot out of joining some women communities where I have been encouraged to, yeah, start doing some nervous system regulation, start using herbal teas and treatments to ail myself in that time, and to really treat it like a ritual. It's almost like every month you have this like beautiful opportunity to engage in like a 2-day ritual where all you do is just to be with your experience and make yourself feel good. And you can utilize like little movement, chanting, just like humming, to basically be with the discomfort, be with the pain. And there's also like a sort of like a spiritual or like energetic take on menstruation being the time of exploring themes like death, like letting go, like rebirthing. And I think also engaging with some like reflection around these themes has been really, really meaningful, and also sort of like helped me um, like moves. So that's what I've been noticing, just sort of like taking a bit more of a holistic approach, and in a way attuning to the like frequency of menstruation.
Mm.
I think has been quite helpful for my experience of it, even though you know the pains still are there.
Mm-hmm.
They are just often not as severe as they were. They don't last as long, and yeah. And they're like more kind of like varied, where it used to be like every month, this like really terrible day. And
Mm-hmm.
now it's sometimes it's 2, 3 hours, but it's not quite at the same level.
Mm. Yeah, I'm glad to hear that. It sounds like a fruitful exploration there, and I hope that like progress, so to speak, in quotes, continues. Yeah. Um,
Me
yeah, I'd love to.
too.
Yeah. So say we all. I'd love to know more about, you mentioned like women's groups and maybe women's circles. I saw you like tweeted some things a few times around those. Where to start here? Yeah, just what's your history with women's groups and how are those part of your life right now?
Yeah, I'm suddenly taken with the question of like, where did it start?
Mhm.
I need to search my memory. Yeah, I think there was like the first entry point into this question of like, what does it mean to be a woman in today's world? Came actually before these painful periods started. It was maybe 5 years ago. I was sort of leaving a 7-year-old relationship. It was quite difficult. There was this sense of like losing myself or not quite knowing how to trust myself, and who am I like without this person? And specifically, this concept of like intuition was on my mind because I think I felt like I lost my intuition. And I remember, my grandma saying like, "Oh, like intuition is this gift of women." Then I was like, "Well, so if I lost it now, am I not a woman?"
Mm.
And I remember just being quite confused. And I encountered one woman who I talked about this with, and she was like, "I have this sense that you would really enjoy reading this book, Women Who Run with the Wolves." And I was very intrigued. And I picked up the copy like next month, and I think that was really like the sort of initiation into the world where there's a whole kind of philosophy around like what the feminine is, what is that energy, and what are their gifts. Where I think up until then, in my sort of cultural and social um, sort of like area of my life, like I think there's been quite a lot of more messages around like the weakness of women or the emotionality of women. And even the way I was working and learning, that felt very like quite like masculine in a way. So I think that really was like the portal into like, wow, there's like a different story here, and I've never like no one ever told me this. And the feeling was something like, why did my mother or my grandma didn't tell me about this? Like this feels like a Bible for women, but like no one ever gave me this book. So that was really the feeling.
Mm.
And I think kind of um, soon after, I think I become quite intrigued to connect maybe with more women about how they think about femininity. And I remember that maybe one of the first events was a women's retreat that I was invited to in 2019. Um, yeah, and I think from there, I moved to London, and then I was inspired to sort of put together like my own little women's retreat just for my friends. And from there, like hosting women's circles here and there, and also joining like a few women communities where I was able to learn from women who sort of seemed to have a little bit more like attunement to something, and they have like practiced with some doulas, usually in South America. So there was this almost like a sense of like a lineage that has some wisdom that I didn't see around me.
Mm. Wow. I'm so glad you mentioned Women Who Run with the Wolves. I bookmarked another tweet of yours where you mentioned you think of it like a Bible for the feminine. So I'm tickled to hear that same description in this conversation. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'd love to know more about this book. What is it about it that's so, I mean, sounds clearly very like impactful and powerful for you. What are the messages there that speak so vocally to you?
Yeah. Hmm. So there's something interesting in the like imagery and the like symbolism that is used in the book. For example, the in the very introduction, there's like this very evocative description of the woman being like a wolf, and sort of the description of the wolf being like both strong and caring. This sort of like bridging of like the polarity of, you know, like sort of instead of like women are weak, it's like no, they are like strong and like passionate and very caring in this like kind of animal way. Like I think there was just something beautiful for me about even just that opening, having that new like symbol for thinking about the feminine.
Hmm.
Um, and the woman who wrote it, Clarissa Pinkola Estes, I believe she like lived with indigenous tribes for a while. And she seemed to have been quite attuned to nature as well. And she basically brings like stories, interweave a kind of a Jungian like analytical view on the different archetypes and the different patterns that it seems like, you know, specifically women seem to the sense of almost like a work or like a developmental model for the feminine. And I think that was kind of fascinating for me. Like that there is a certain, both there are certain like pitfalls or patterns that the feminine seems to be engaged in, and also there's like a certain like developmental journey of like stepping into more like power and self connection and service and love. Um, and I think that was pretty like crazy to me. I was like, wow. And then I read another book that was called The Heroine's Journey by Maureen Murdoch. And I think that was even more explicitly stating like a whole model of the development of the feminine. And I love a good framework, so I really enjoyed it.
Hmm. Yeah, I'm also a framework enjoyer. Ah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's great how yeah, the women who run with the wolves seem to give you just another, yeah, just symbol and imagery and description of a womanhood that sounds like hadn't occurred to you, hadn't been aware of it before, but really expanded your conception of womanhood after reading it.
Yeah, I think maybe it made me excited to be a woman
Hmm.
for the first time or something like that.
Oh.
I actually never said it out loud, but I'm just like, oh yeah, I think that's what it was. And you know, and I never doubted that I was a woman. Like that was somehow like never really like a question that I had, but I think I didn't really quite feel excited about it. Um, and I didn't really have like a very complex sense of what it actually means. And in a way, I think in my day to day, both at work and in my friendships that were mostly male, in some sense, I could say maybe I felt more genderless or even more masculine at times.
Hmm. Hmm. Wow. Do you know like kind of what brought about those in those spaces feelings of like genderness or more masculine uh experience for yourself?
I think there's like two things here. One, I think I just have like a pretty strong masculine element. Like, you know, like I just said, like I love a good framework. There's like a certain excitement that I have around explicitness about like pursuing a goal, mission, like doing stuff in the world. Um, and so I think that that's just fine and wholesome, and that's just like a part of my essence or something. So I was drawn to some of these things. But I think there is maybe like a more insidious thing that goes on, which is that, you know, you grow up and I see my mom staying at home. I see my dad going to work and sort of like achieving, and there's like a sense of coolness about that. And then I go to school and, you know, I see that there's like a certain way to be to achieve to like achieve kind of like success in that system. Um that yeah, that also feels like a little bit like what we then encounter at work, where again we have like explicit goals and we run after them and we go in sprints and like we sort of behave as if every day our body was the same day. And so I just feel like there's like something in the air that never quite made me stop and think that not doing goal less or like just being more in pleasure that qualities like that are desirable, that they would like amount to anything.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, so I think it's both a mix of like my personal wiring and the fact that like I was in an environment that didn't quite make me reflect on the fact that the way I'm being is just one of the two kind of fundamental ways of being. Like it's um, like it's just one of the two fundamental energies.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. One like framework you kind of mentioned there that has been resonant for me lately. If you think of like having um, resonance with your own internal like masculine expression and feminine expression, it's kind of like a 2x2 grid. Friends online we love our two
Yeah.
by twos. To me, it's a gift for anyone who is able to really tap in and feel and understand like the distinction of having both like a higher feminine expression understanding and internally and a higher masculine expression understanding. Because there's just so much to each of those parts of the polarity. And like if you, regardless of your actual like physical gender, if you're missing out on really not being attuned to your own feminine or your own masculine, there's so much there that it feels like a little sad to not be aware of or not be curious about or not want to explore within yourself.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Hmm. No, well, it makes me want to sort of share that. Um, like I'm in the process of like observing like an interesting dynamic where I mean this is going to be very simplified also, but like let's just go with that. Maybe I'll find some new complexity in it, but there is that sense of like, oh yeah, most of my life I've been in this like sort of masculine polarity. Maybe it was a little bit unhealthy, a little bit unreflective. And then I was like, all right, let's explore the feminine polarity. And I really like sort of dove in and like sort of like quit my job last year, and I was like, oh, let's go full steam in this direction. And then yeah, and then now I'm like, oh, okay, like I've been touching also like the negative side of like just being in the feminine and being like very like scattered and very yeah like high emotions and like kind of hard to like execute on a thing and like just having a lot of ideas but not quite like directing the energy anywhere. And I was like, oh yeah, like I think what needs to happen is I need to bring back the masculine but somehow like without losing the feminine, um like not to sort of go back in time and just be as I was, but somehow like have them coexist in a more wholesome dynamic. And so I feel like that's very much what's happening now. Like I basically started a new project last month, which is sort of a book that I'm calling A Little Book of Feminine Wisdom, which is basically just me trying to like write some stories and insights from this exploration. And I realized that I need this healthy inner masculine to do projects. Like it's not just about the inspiration, about the ideas and the writing, it's also about the structure and like loving discipline and yeah, and just like kind of holding a container for this like feminine intense energy. And so I feel like I just continue to like be surprised by what's emerging in this journey. But the thing that seems true is like there's some kind of integration between these two energies. There's some kind of like a loving relationship that they need to be in. And I think most of the time I don't quite feel in it, but there's times when I have like felt them work together pretty well. And that's been really cool.
Hmm. Yeah, that's so lovely to hear. Like resonates with my own experience and one of a friend. As she liked to put it, the like for herself internally, the masculine like acts and does in order to make space for the feminine to just be, just give
Yeah.
time and space and a container for her to just be and relax. And magic happens when like both sides of that dynamic are fulfilled and harmonious and they're not in conflict and they're able to communicate within the internal landscape. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, just skillfully.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hmm. I'd love to know what has inspired or got you to start writing the little book of feminine wisdom.
um, hmm. So yeah, I guess I'm just checking with where that was exactly. But this year, I've been exploring death and grief quite a lot. I lost a very good friend at the end of the year, quite unexpectedly, and
Mm,
yeah, and that really opened up this topic for me in a way that it wasn't present before. And I guess yeah, I've had a pretty like rough months, especially during spring. I sort of went back home to Poland, and I decided that I just really needed to like be with all the feelings that were moving through me and sort of slowly like reestablish some kind of like balance internally. Because I think my nervous system got a little bit out of whack from like really asking myself every day, what if I die now? Also, what if all the people I love die? And so it became a little bit intense. I think a bit too much for my body, actually, even though my mind wanted to like continue exploring and find meaning in this topic. And I remember one day where I had one of the like kind of pretty big waves of grief and fear of death come over me. And I was just asking myself, like, where do I find answers? Like how do I like, I don't know, talk to someone or read something where I can find a different frame on death? Like somehow that would make me less afraid of it. And then I actually realized that wow, like every time in the past few years when I've had these big like wow, I'm so confused. I need guidance. Like I would kind of go to Women Who Run with the Wolves or one of these other books that I've encountered and just like sort of flip the pages and see if there's any guidance. And usually there would be something that would impact me. And here again, I went to the book and I found some of these beautiful metaphors. For example, from I think some like Mexican traditions where doulas would think that death is a woman who helps to turn the baby's head around just before birth to like help the baby step into the world. And I was like, wow, this is so nice.
mm,
like a friendly presence in the process of bringing life forward. And immediately, I felt a bit different. And then I had this thought of like, I think I should like collect these quotes and insights that have helped me in some kind of a document. I opened the doc. I called it a little book of feminine wisdom and started just like dropping some quotes. And then 2 months later, a friend of mine, Kelly Wild Miller, she was posting on Twitter saying that she's doing a 30-day book writing challenge. And I was like, all right, I guess we're going to explore writing it as a book. And then, yeah, and then it felt right to continue.
mm. How exciting. Ah, hmm. Yeah, I'd love to go back to you mentioned hanging around the women's groups and circles. I believe you have set up or started or ran your own either one time or ongoing women's groups and events. I'd love to know what was your process for creating that container, deciding what would and wouldn't happen, anything around logistics or what stood out around the actual events themselves, just anything around your experience of running women's groups
Mm,
or events.
mm, mm. Yeah, so I run some retreats, so just for my friends, like when I was in London. And I think that was really just because I was feeling the need to like gather with women and explore some of these questions together. Because I think I felt like I was sort of reaching the limit of what I could do alone. I think that was like initial motivation. And then I did like some sort of women's circles, and then this January I launched like an online group. It was a 3 month experiment, so it was sort of a closed thing because I really wanted to explore, um, yeah, I guess something like leading a group, but in a more surrendered way, like in a little bit more feminine way, um, and yeah, and I just wanted like a container where I can play with that. And I was also really excited about creating a space where we can connect both to witness each other's experiences, but also to create like a platform where, me and some of my female friends can bring forward some of the offerings that they are coming up with, because I just like have a lot of really incredible female friends who are bringing forward some cool offerings. And I think that I wanted this like intermediate space where we can try things out and sort of test them on each other. Um, before actually going out into the public. And yeah, and that was really really nice because I think I realized how much I want to create something like that, some kind of like a launch pad, some kind of a safe, like womb like space where we
Um,
can meet and experiment together. Um, I do think that, yeah, like I do think that there's something about the format of it that I need to figure out. Um, I'm also torn personally between like, I just like want more in-person hangouts with women versus like hosting sort of public events. Like there's that like kind of split between like, well, I just want to have a small group of female friends and meet every Thursday and do some art versus like, I want to put forward this event where we like come and explore something intentionally. um, so yeah, like I think I'm finding myself in a bit of a transition. I think at the beginning I felt like I'm doing it almost like for other women so that they can also like step onto this journey. I think now it's much more obvious to me that I'm really doing it for myself because um, both like I need other women to make sense of this stuff. And also there's some, um, yeah, there's something I think I'm trying to heal about connection with women, um, which stems from an event that happened when I was in middle school, where there was like a kind of a betrayal that I experienced from the side of women, and a pain. And I
mm,
think there's also something to do with the kind of mother wound, maybe some kind of stuff like that. Which I don't know. I never really want to go too much into stories because in the end I really don't know. But there's a sense that I sort of came preloaded with some fear around women and
mm,
really connecting with women or being rejected by women. And I think that like my exploration and interest in this direction is also about trying to create a different reality where we can really be like connected and supportive and loving towards each other.
mm. It's so cool that yeah, you notice these like desires in yourself and took action to sort of set up opportunities and spaces for you to, as you said, like run experiments and try things with other women. Would you be willing to share an example of a specific thing that you attempted with or tried with other women that had an impact for either yourself or other women in this group?
Yeah. Um, so something that I really enjoyed at one of, I think it was on the second retreat that I run, we did this activity where we sort of, came in a circle and everyone had 2, 3 minutes to share what emerges for them when they hear the word femininity. Um, and so that was a really cool exercise of basically, going around and getting like 12 different definitions of femininity, and like trying to hold all of them as true at the same time rather than picking like who's right, who's wrong. That was a really beautiful activity, and I'm running it again actually in September, on the 12th of September. I'm doing like an online circle where I want to like redo this exercise. Um, the other thing that was really cool was, um, to be honest, like just getting into a call and going around and like sharing what's alive. Something that was really potent about it was that many of us came forward and shared how tired we were, how emotional we were, how like, how like we feel like exhausted with all the things that we're holding in our life. And at the end we sort of concluded that, wow, like it's so nice to have a place where we have permission to be like messy and figure it out and just like real. So from that I was feeling like, yeah, like I think there's a need to just have a space where you can come and just reveal all that's on your heart. um so yeah, it's kind of like a very simple format but quite impactful.
Yeah. And as someone who's attended a few men's only spaces as well, it does feel like there's some kind of alchemy or freedom or it's hard to describe. Like there's something available when it's just the same single gender space that allows for like going like deep and a little less like, I don't know, fear or internal resistance around expressing just vulnerable things. Um,
Yes.
yeah. I would love to bring in,
Actually, when you say that, Oh,
Yeah, please.
when you shared that, I thought I might bring in like one more example, which was very impactful for me. It was about 2 years ago. I attended one of my first uh, anger release workshops, which was also in the context of just women, and it was in person in London. And I think something that was really jarring for me was how much it just really took like one woman in the group to like dare to scream or make a louder noise for others to feel the permission to do so as well.
Mm.
And so I was just really taken with like, how much easier it is in such context to like kind of lean into these sides of us that we're kind of a little bit afraid to explore on our own for kind of like right reasons, because probably at some point it didn't feel safe to do so. But yeah, it was really striking to me how we all started, in a circle sharing about how, oh, I don't feel my anger and I don't know how to express my anger, and just like really feeling kind of like disempowered. And then, 5 minutes into the ritual, some drums came in, like someone started making some sounds, and in the next moment, everyone was just going for it.
Mm.
It seems like actually your body knows like how to move through that emotion, but I think it's the permission that is often in the way.
Mm. Wow. Yeah, it's always so yeah, beautiful when someone dares to go first to be a little more vulnerable or a little more expressive and you the other people witness that, oh, they're still safe and I'm not I don't judge them or resent them for doing that. So it's safe for me to do that too without fear of consequence. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, I'd love to bring in here around this conversation around like connecting with women. A few tweets from you around this around this topic. Yeah. Uh, on August 6th, 2024, you tweeted, nervous system regulation and bodily pleasure seem to be precursors to women love in the sense of undoing the competition and jealousy conditioning. Need to get on the floor more, roll around, sigh, laugh, and then we can somehow just be with each other more. I'm just so tired of feeling contracted and scared around women, even those I know well and feel safe around. There's just this deep, deep residue of unsafety somewhere still that's challenging to fully dissolve. But we're starting to get there with a few of them. Yeah, and it just sounds like exactly what you described, like more emoting, more presence with each other. Um, hmm, hmm. I don't know if I have a question there. I just wanted to add that. And yeah.
Yeah, I'm sitting with the impact of you reading out these tweets. Yeah, because I think there's a way in which I'm a little bit like afraid of saying these things actually. Like it feels a bit edgy. Um, but yeah, but I think that it feels real, and it's been very interesting recently to have conversations with a few female friends where we voiced ways in which we don't feel fully open to each other, or ways in which we notice ourselves like slightly contracting around like this idea of being big and like stepping into our fullness, and how we both really want to do it energetically because it feels nice, but also there's this fear of like, well, is that gonna take away from your space, is that gonna dim you, like can we actually both be big together, like is that
Mm-hmm.
allowed, like have we ever experienced that? And yeah, and I think that it's been really cool to just be able to name that, to like feel into where it's true, but also then to feel into where it's not true. Like if we just like start, if we like stand up and start like jumping around together, yeah, like you are in big energy together. Like there's like a way in which you can practice that is like not very scary. It's just sort of almost like practical. It's just like, yeah, like just open your arms, to the sides, and let's like stand there and look at each other and be big together. So I feel like there's these like little exercises that we can do to to just like notice that actually it's not like threatening to each other to expand. But many of us had this thing with maybe with our mom where like there was a sense that she's like the big woman of the house and you're not, or maybe there's this way in which you're being taught to like give space to other and make other women feel nice. So I just feel like there's a lot of these like kind of subtle things that are there in the water. But yeah, it also takes like so little to actually just like falsify it and be like, no, 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 like it's fine. Like we can be here, we can be our full selves. It's not a danger. So I'm excited about that recently, about just like maybe naming the fear, but also just like moving through it and experimenting with it.
Hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's something there too, um, around what you mentioned, not just I think for women to women connections, but anyone where if there is some contraction or judgment or resistance from one person to another, um, that's in the water in the connection. Like you can either let it kind of subtly come out through tone and body language and everything, or you can just be forthright about it and say, "Hey, I feel resistance towards you because of this or whatever it is." And part of me wants to just like purport that it's so much healthier and like stronger for the connection when you're willing to say the scary thing and be vulnerable and go first with it and just dare to speak what your body is telling you around a contraction or resistance towards another person.
Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, I want to go back to, I want to cough. Much better. Towards the first question I asked around what's alive for you, I bookmarked that you mentioned
Hmm.
in both in connections with men and women, the words surrender, care, and vulnerability stuck out. Um, I'd love to hear more about how any of those concepts and ideas have been, yeah, alive for you lately.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, I noticed that I like have things to say, and also there's like a bit of somehow nervousness around how much I've been using these labels of like men and women and kind of like creating these two buckets of things.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and somehow I just have been noticing more recently like the way in which I don't know how people understand these terms. Like I've just been going off of like my sense of like what I mean, and maybe also noticing the way I see the world in a bit of a binary way. And there is like a whole piece to it that is non-binary. And I have really just one friend in that world. And so there's just like a certain lack of understanding and attunement that I have to the non-binariness or the non-duality. But I'm going to just kind of putting that aside because I think that's just like sort of in the way of me being here fully. Um, yeah, like I think that there's definitely a way in which there is something quite like challenging that I've been exploring around, stepping more into my feminine energy with my romantic partner and like learning to depend on him
Mm-hmm.
in this quite like a traditional way, where like he's the breadwinner and I'm like the homemaker. Like it's something that creates like a pretty deep fear in me because I have seen my mother be in that dynamic and really feel constrained by it and feel like she gave up on herself. And there was always this strong message of like, you need to be a strong and independent and especially financially independent woman. And, I've pursued that for the past 10 years of my life, but it only got me this far. And I feel like I had to actually step away from this concept of I need to make money, I need to have a job, I need to sustain myself, independently every month to explore some facets of the feminine. Uh, and it's been both like very vulnerable to be with that. Um, and also, I'm notably the next step of this is like it's neither I'm fully financially independent nor I'm fully financially dependent. It's like, yeah, I can depend on my partner and I am like making my own living as well. And they both kind of exist at the same time. But that's just not something that's in a way in my bones. Like the thing that's in my bones is that is that world where you're either
Hmm.
screwed or like you're really independent. um, so yeah, I think that's like the one thing that's alive, which I guess I'm tagging onto vulnerability and surrender. Um, and if I was to like name one thing that I'm exploring with my female friendships, I think it is actually conflict.
Hmm.
Um, it is actually like naming some emotions or parts of me that feel edgy, that feel angry, that feel resentful, um, that feel judgmental, and trusting that the relationship can hold it. Um, yeah, that's it's also like kind of really somatically terrifying for me to like in a way disagree with a woman or get angry at a woman. Like there's like a deep somatic fear there. But I feel like I've been like slowly able to explore that in some of my relationships with women, and it feels really exciting.
Hmm. And that somatic fear is not present when you're in a similar situation with a man. Is that right?
Yeah, and I've been thinking about why is that?
Yeah.
You know, and it's not that I'm like perfectly okay, sort of like having conflict with men, because that's also not true. In a way, the more I care about someone, the harder it is for me to have conflict with them, because then there's a fear of losing the relationship. But I have noticed that on average, sort of disagreeing with a man can be more playful, more kind of bantery and fun. It's almost like an invitation into play, and
Hmm.
it does not feel that way on average with women.
Wow. Yeah, I'm just feeling into that. Hmm. My first like gut hypothesis is like, is that just the fact that more naturally, generally, might be more of a polarity with any man you're disagreeing with, where something around like him being able to be potentially more masculine, you more feminine, provides levity to the conflict somehow. Is that
Yeah,
I'm really curious, like
yeah,
for yourself, is that could that be part of what's happening? Like what is it around disagreeing with a man that allows for more lightness to it?
yeah, yeah. I'd actually be curious how it is like for others as well, because I guess I'm not sure if this is like this particular like wiring that I said that I have, both around like having been hurt by women and like I guess developing some mechanisms to like not really hurt women again so that they don't hurt me back. Like I think that's definitely been a part of my
Hmm.
um and then at the same time having some sort of like masculine qualities, like enjoying like verbal kind of like sort of like play and being like explicit and um yeah and that just somehow being more reciprocated with men. Um, but also it feels right to me that there is like a kind of a invitation into a polarity, um, where like, you know, like even there's this thing that I've heard where, um, to like help the feminine really come out, you need safety. Like that's kind of like the phrase that I often hear in some of these circles. Um, I'm not sure what it is exactly for men. Maybe it's challenge to like really bring forward like the masculine. um, so
Hmm.
I think that there's something there too. Um, yeah.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, I wonder if there's like in a like generic man and woman disagreement, if there's still a maybe subconscious or embodied understanding that she wants to feel safe. He can help make her feel safe, even in like in the tension, in the disagreement, in the conflict. There can still be that kind of foundational container of safety.
Yeah.
Yeah, which may or which
Yeah.
might not. It sounds like in some cases for you be present with women. Like if no one's prioritizing either woman's feelings of safety, then you might want to both of you feel unsafe in the conflict and not want to or not feel safe to yeah bring it up or talk through it.
Yeah. And, you know, I think maybe there's an additional thing that I'm with recently, which is that you can like make someone feel safe, but also each individual can like if they have skills to like regulate their nervous system and notice their state, right? And just like feel like some agency with that, then if we are both like baseline watching out for our sense of safety, like in kind of like more secure attachment patterns, then you also don't need to worry about it this much. You can actually trust that, like, we can navigate these like triggering things. But if someone's really dysregulated and you pull them a trigger, they're just gonna like explode or get reactive. And I think in that situation, there's more of a sense of, oh, I need to manage their state because they are not managing their state. So I think
Hmm.
if I think about the situations where I have been able to like go into these more edgy, risky areas, it has been in relationships where I feel the other person like is watching out for their safety.
Hmm. Yeah, a resonant word here for me is sovereignty, where, in moments of
Mm,
disagreement, conflict, tension, if both individuals are sovereign, like they can be aware of their own internal states, even like their blind spots to some degree,
yeah,
or just have an awareness around who they are and what they're bringing to the disagreement. If both people are sovereign,
yeah,
from there, neither person has to like people please or take care of the other one or like tiptoe around their edges or triggers. They can both be fully honest and present with each other. And so when both people are sovereign, there's a kind of synergy where you can really just mesh well and uh, keep the connection alive through disagreement, through the high emotionality potentially, through the conflict.
yeah.
Yeah. Hmm. Uh, I want to bring in another tweet of yours, semi-related to this
Okay.
kind of little bit of polarity discussion here. uh, this one's a little difficult to parse without context. I'll just read it and then kind of highlight the part that sticks out to me.
Hmm.
It's in a larger thread of yours. On August 18th, 2024, you tweeted, "Another thing that resonated was the idea that men need women, which I instinctively translate into the masculine needs the feminine to complete their hero's journey. And I sent a reply highlighting ways in which I believe women need men to complete theirs too." Yeah, so I'd love to hear more about, with both sides of that. What does it mean for men to need women to complete their hero's journey, and vice versa?
Yeah. Oh, very also very recent and alive topic. I was in London last week where I was chatting with a friend about the tweet that caused this thread that you're reading from. And there was just like a lot of emotions and a lot of like different views and takes on some of these statements. Um, which I think also brought me closer to the fact that there's kind of like an idealistic part of me somewhere here who really believes in this like divine future for the feminine and the masculine, like, integration. And yeah, and I think that there's like some hope that I have from, I think, my embodied experience, um, where it's almost like there's this kind of interesting spiral, like upward spiral dynamic that I see where, let's say, if I step into more mature feminine, it like it almost like immediately makes the masculine around me step into more mature masculine. And the
Mm.
reverse is true. When I like encounter a mature masculine, like I feel like it almost like calls forward a certain maturity in my feminine. And I'm like really fascinated by that dynamic. And I've observed it like here and there, both in my life and outside. And yeah, I'm just like really interested in how could we help each other grow. And I don't know, like a very simple example of this is when I have first started feeling more in touch with this contraction that I would experience around women. I was like just very sad. I was just like very kind of overwhelmed and feeling like I'm fighting some big forces here that I don't understand. And also feeling like I can't talk about this with other women because then it will immediately imply that I don't feel safe around them. So I
Mm.
felt a bit stuck around like how to move through that. And actually, support from men in my life was like really helpful in that time, where they were able to just like hold space for me and hear me out and help me like think about how because it was like gain strength in a way to like approach it with women. And I was like, oh wow, that's kind of interesting. Like I feel like, yeah, I like needed not a women's circle to solve this problem, so that I could then gain some kind of like strength or like clarity about how to bring that forward in the context of being with women. Um, so that's one example that comes up. Um, yeah, I'm kind of curious because I think I saw maybe something was arising for you, and I wonder what that was.
Oh, yeah, thank you for noticing that. Um, yeah, I was thinking about a another kind of like two by two description of aware and unaware expressions of masculine and feminine that I largely learned from a retreat last year. But for example, like one of the aware masculine traits is to hold space and to witness without judgment. And one claim from that experience for me was that you meet one gender, in quotes, unaware state with the other gender's aware state. So I think maybe, for example, an unaware feminine expression can be like victimizing oneself or another person or like gossiping.
Yeah,
So if a man's able to just like witness her do that and hold space for it and not judge her for it, um, that's a healthier way to navigate that as opposed to an unhealthy masculine uh, uh, failure mode is just like loud anger and like even like violence, whether just like with a loud voice or just taking up a ton of space and not letting her feel free to say whatever she wants to say. Um, yeah, that was what had clicked in my mind as you were
yeah.
sharing some of what you shared. Yeah.
Mm.
Hmm.
Yeah, I've also been thinking quite a lot about these it's interesting that you call them unaware because I've been sort of shuffling between the different names. I've tried like toxic feminine patterns, but that felt very pathologizing.
Yeah.
And then I tried like immature feminine patterns, but again, that's like a little bit negative. So I guess the unaware or like unconscious maybe is a bit more in the ballpark. But yeah, but I've been thinking about these some of these ways in which I guess when the feminine does not feel safe um, or seen, I think there are these like interesting patterns that often unfortunately get like tagged onto like how women are. But yeah, but I think that there is just like a lack of or like a scarcity of like models of what a healthy, mature, like aware feminine is like. And I think also masculine, to be honest. Um, but actually, on that note, something that I found very helpful was at some point realizing that nature is like the embodiment of like the feminine, and
Mm.
somehow I found that like really supportive for my process because like there's this like thing that people say, and I often feel it as well, that we have no elders, like somehow like we need to generate wisdom for our own generation. And I think yeah, I found quite some solace in like remembering that, oh, like maybe ocean and mountains are like expressions of the feminine and masculine in nature, and maybe we can find some inspiration there for some kind of like wisdom as well. And it's sort of like all around us, like it's always available. And yeah, and so I feel like there's that question ongoing in my mind of like what is like the mature version of these qualities, and what is like the immature or unaware version of these qualities, and how do we like have more capacity to name them in our relationships and work with them.
Hmm. Yeah, I do feel like at least the word like toxic is very played out there, like very, I don't know, 2010s and has a lot of baggage on it. So something around like mature or aware feels like a stronger descriptor of what we want to um, elevate and like move towards is like people who care about this kind of stuff. Hmm. 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 Hmm.
There's actually one interesting example here that I can bring on this like men need women, women need men
Yeah.
to complete their journey, um, which was actually inspired by a book I'm reading called Feminine Consciousness by Marion Woodman. She was also a Jungian analyst in the 90s, and she named something that I think I felt or observed, but I haven't quite had the words for, which is how like a lot of women have some kind of either body issues or some like eating disorders.
Hmm.
Often that stems from like their mothers. Like there's like a whole kind of intergenerational loop of like, how um it's hard for women to love their bodies for many different reasons. And often we were exposed to women who didn't love their bodies, and we like internalized some of that. And then in some sense, like Marion Woodman called it like we are like unmothered, like we don't know how to love ourselves and our bodies. And often we put that job onto our romantic partner. Like we hope that he will help us love our body because our
Mm,
mother didn't.
mm,
And yeah, I found that like very, very moving, both because I think I observed it for myself. Like there was like a significant increase in my ability to love my body from seeing my partner love it.
mm,
Um, and also like, I don't know, it just speaks to like how complex that dynamic is, and also how like putting our partner in that role is also not quite like wholesome for the relationship. Like it's actually about us like learning to love ourselves, but sometimes you do need someone to show you how. Um, so yeah, so like I think that's like another example that's quite evocative for me around this like needing each other.
mm. Yeah, wow. It feels to me there's like a rhyming here of just as in your women's groups, like one woman's brave enough to go first with like being vulnerable and loud and whatever to help free or show the women, oh, I can be this way too. I'm going to generalize this next part. So I've experienced it myself. There's
Mm.
a gift with like male libido, desire, attraction towards women, where just for example, if she has some like body insecurity around, I don't know, like cellulite or waking, whatever it is, and he still cherishes and is devoted to her and just is fully like loving and has no reaction to whatever she's like noticing with her body. That can, show her like, oh, I'm still so like beautiful or sexy or whatever, how the insecurity is manifesting, hot, cute, whatever. Um, and she can really internalize that for herself and not like need his like validation or expression there to yeah, like basically his uh his desire and expression of that is a catalyst for her to like have more sovereignty and security around her own her own body, however it like is
Yeah.
looking at the moment. Yeah. Yeah. Mm. And so that's one way a
Yeah,
man
and
can
as we're
help.
speaking about this,
Mhm.
yeah, like,
I was gonna say that's like
yeah. I
another
mean,
way.
I just want to say that.
After
Yeah, you
you.
go for it.
I was gonna say that's one another way a man can help a woman complete her hero's journey, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, and I was also like, as we're talking about this, I was also just like, kind of like remembering that obviously, like, there's also ways in which we can really impede our heroines' journeys, by hurting each other in men-women relationships. But yeah, but I also think that maybe we often talk about these ways. Like, there's quite a lot of that being talked about. But I think maybe we don't talk as often about the ways in which we can help each other heal and grow. And I think that's the part of me that's like, kind of activated in life. And in that tweet, I was basically trying to point to the fact that, yeah, there lives some part of me that's like really excited about this future.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, same here. For all the and I do pay attention to like the sort of negative gender discourse discussions, but I do also see a lot of shifting aware, like more broader awareness of it, at least in people I pay more attention to, and shifting towards seeking understanding and just generally compassion, empathy towards the other gender's experiences and their perspectives. Yeah. Um, I want to bring in another tweet of yours. They keep going.
I'm loving this.
Great. Me too. On June 29th, 2023, you tweeted, idea that feels really activating now. Women don't need to step into their power. They are already powerful. They need to learn how to hold their power. Right now, they get scared and repress it or frustrated and oppress others with it. Their skill and feminine power.
Oh, I'm kind of humbled hearing it because that was like a year ago, and here I am. I feel like I'm very much in the exploration right now of all the ways in which I'm disempowering myself, and and this tweet is interesting to hear in this moment. Yeah,
Wow. Hmm. Hmm. I mean, I'd love to know if you're willing to share. How are you disempowering yourself currently?
yeah. Let's see. I think part of it is I have been a little bit kind of overwhelmed, um, because some of these ways are not really visible to me until I feel like really disempowered. um, and there's, and there's this constant sense of like, oh yeah, like what happened there? Like why like this? Um, but I think maybe I should also say that I definitely feel in some sense more kind of powerful, and maybe we should like define what that means. Than like last year. Like there's a way in which I'm able to explore my disempowerment because I have become more powerful, because I have like a bit more self-holding and a bit more inner safety to actually look at these patterns. So I feel like it's interesting how these things kind of seem to go together, like both like empowering yourself and then being able to be with the places where there's not enough power or there isn't power. Um, but yeah, I'm kind of drawn to like try to say what power means to me right now in this sense, and specifically feminine power, um, because it's such a charged word. And yeah, I think there's like at least three aspects of it that I'm exploring. One is the power in anger or in rage, but more the experience of like allowing anger to roll through your system and like feel the like strength that comes from having that power inside of you, that sort of like emotion, as your ally, to show you like where you can protect yourself and what you love and what you care for. So that feels like one aspect of power. Um, and I'm thinking here about the goddess Kali, and just like sort of like rah, this like very very like intense kind of
Mm.
no, get away from me, kind of a feeling. And then there's this other aspect which has to do with play. Um, there's there's a video that feels like really spiritually meaningful for me that I saw a few years ago, where there were these anthropologists who went to a tribe in, I think, in Borneo, called the Penan tribe, and they witnessed how men and women in the village had their like weekly rituals, and um, the women's ritual was really kind of its role was to mock men a little bit, to sort
Mm.
of like gently bring them back in line and not have their egos, be too high. And so, for example, if there was a man who were like, I'm going to be the best hunter and I'm going to be, just like the alpha male, in the ritual, women might like make jokes out of him to sort of, in a way, like jokingly expel him from the group, but also within the ritual to like give him the opportunity to like come back to the group and like appreciate that he needs to play along to be a part of the tribe. And so there's something like really interesting there about using play or mockery to bring balance into the system. And I think that feels to me like a feminine quality, where
Mm.
it's not like rules and like offending and like arguments. It's more just like, oh, we're gonna like in this playful way show you or like give you a little lesson. um, so that's like really exciting to me somehow, and I feel this is like under talked about as a feminine power. And then there's the third aspect, which is something like being like attuned to your desire, to your wants, and and expressing that in the world and like pursuing that. Like I think that's also pretty powerful. And yeah, and again, I feel like this is like a place that like I definitely struggle with that, and I think I hear like quite a lot of women struggling with that, to like really not just to like feel your wants and dreams, but like to actually really honor them in your life and really pursue them without thinking that you're too much or that you're wanting too much.
Mm.
So yeah, there's
Yeah.
something about like anger. There's something about, but like anger as love, I guess, and something about play and something about dreams or like desires.
Yeah, I was just saying with that. I love frameworks with three parts: anger, play, desires.
I don't think that's all of it. I mean, I
Sure,
think,
sure.
for example, just love, like embodying love, I think is
Hmm.
power too.
Hmm.
Um, but those are the three that I've been like kind of, yeah, exploring the most recently.
Yeah. How do you think women can help each other or men can help women to uh, better honor their desires or express them or whatever is you describe, like holding women back from embodying and expressing and honoring their desires. What do you think? How can we, how can women help each other? How can men help women with that?
Hmm. Well, I'm also trying to figure that out.
Yeah.
But I can name some things that have been helpful recently. So one was just another woman asking me, like, what are your dreams? And just like creating that space for me to connect with these things that emerge, without judgment and without sort of like qualifying them in any way. So just having people who will actually be there for our dreams seems pretty significant, and for our wants. And actually, just today, I was hanging out with two male friends, and I was telling them that I would like to explore what are some of my wants and desires for being in Lisbon. And they suggested this little exercise where for 5 minutes, I'm just like speaking anything that comes to my mind about what I would like to experience in Lisbon. And after everyone, they were just like resonating enthusiastically, sort of encouraging me to want these
Mm.
things. And that was a very beautiful exercise. It like felt very nourishing to my soul, to just be encouraged in that activity of speaking these wants out loud. Um, and yeah, and I think maybe something that is a little bit harder, or at least I find it quite difficult, is it seems like, we go through our life and things happen that make us feel like our dreams like cannot be fulfilled, or that we need to give up on them. And I think that it's really important to find a way to grieve those dreams, um, to like really, really kind of complete the cycle of both like letting go of it and really acknowledging like how important it is for us. But I think often through that activity, we're actually able to either like realize that it is still possible, or we find like a new version of that dream that is still possible. And so I feel like there's some important work of like grief to like kind of stay connected with that power.
Mm. 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 Yeah, this speaks to me. I'm hearing from that there's just like power in letting a desire uh, be received or be expressed or even be like transformed or transmuted. If it can exist beyond like the person's interiority, if it can be received by someone else, interacted with, questioned, explored through someone else's eyes and experience, that alone can, um, I don't know, like, yeah, foster creativity, safety, encouragement,
Yeah.
empowerment. Yeah, beautiful. Hmm. Um, hmm. I think I want to like reflect on the other two parts you mentioned around like women's power. I know there's like love too and other things, but the play really tickles me just because I think about
Mm.
some like this is like part of online vitriol where like if a woman teases a man, really like
Mm.
it's kind of a just a challenge or an opportunity for the guy, like just to see his own interiority, like does this wound him or can he like laugh at himself and be like, oh yeah, I'm not so great, I'm this way, yeah, she's kind of right there. um it really is a useful like for any man to receive teasing from anyone, or yeah, just I don't know, it's gonna be gender essential here, but like if anyone's teased, it's like, oh yeah, can I laugh at myself? Can I just be okay with that? Can
Yeah.
I, or do I have to like fight back? Like, no, I'm not that. You're that. You're blah, like be like really snipey and defensive and contracted. Yeah. So it's cool that that's a potential in this framework, and way to access power for women, just to be playful and yeah, kind of challenge someone else in a position of power.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, I want to read one more tweet. It's about anger from you.
Mm.
On April 16th, 2022, you tweeted, Dear women, anger is good. You don't need to manage it or accept it or keep it under control. Let yourself feel it and get it out of your system so you can get clear and light and move on. That's exactly what you just expressed to me a little earlier.
Yeah. Wow, that's pretty interesting that it's from 2022, to be honest. I'm like, wow,
Mhm.
okay. Like in my conscious memory, like I didn't have that insight back then, but apparently I already thought about it back then, which is sort of really fascinating. Also, I have a little bit of a cringe with like the dear women, because really I'm speaking to myself. I'm speaking to myself in that
Yeah.
tweet. That's
Mhm.
very obvious to me.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, but I think, something that probably inspired that tweet was just me going through my own sense of like how like learning how to let the emotion arise, like move, express itself, how it ends, how it sort of like delivers a very interesting like sense of clarity and self-love, and usually an insight about the like sort of like the situation that is causing the anger. And I was just like, wow, like this is so cool. Like I feel like everyone should know about this. And I guess then a tweet happens.
Mhm.
Yeah, but there's something like really, really cool about how if you let the emotion do its job, like it often like gives you a little gift at the end. And that's something that I didn't quite know before I started working with my emotions consciously.
Yeah, I've come to really um, first become aware of and appreciate the value of, I mean, I call this like emotional release and not just anger, but it can be
Mm,
like grief or sadness
yeah,
or even joy. Some people really hold
yeah,
back from really feeling joy about
yeah.
something that's a joyful experience. Yeah. So it's cool you've had an awareness of this for at least a few years now. And yeah, I'm glad that's a part of your interiority.
Mm,
I want to return to, I think, the last thing you mentioned around with the first question of what's alive for you. You mentioned slowing down. Is there anything else that wants to be
mm,
elaborated on there?
mm. Yeah, once again, this is a place where, like, I think, like, I don't know how to tell how much this kind of like generalizes. I have a sense that it generalizes some at least. Um, but there's a way that there's only some things that like there's some things that you can only notice or become aware of, or become sensitive to when you slow down, like when you stop going after some goals or stop feeling like you need to continue to do things, you need to continue moving. And yeah, and I think that there were like a few times in this whole journey for me where I have been like really called to slow down radically. Like I think one of them was after that breakup 5 years ago when, I bought the book Women Who Run with the Wolves. I went to Poland. I got an Airbnb for a month, and I was like, I'm going to sit here until I figure out what's going on. um, and then there were my painful periods, and there was the sense of like, wow, I need to take like a leave from work on that day. I just cannot work like physically. So there was also this sense of like, okay, like just be here with this experience. And then 2 years ago, almost 2 years ago, just before I left my job, I think I was pretty burnt out without quite noticing it. And I joined like an online women's course where we basically we like did a lot of nervous system regulation, a lot of like self massage and like humming and yoga nidra. And during one of these sessions, we sort of like descended into our room. Like that was the meditation, sort of like go into your room and like really hear the message from it. And I was just shocked that the very clear message came up that was just like enough. and and that resonated so hard because at the time I just felt very overwhelmed with like both how much was happening at work and in my life. And from then on, I was like, wow, okay, this was like a really strong signal that I just need to slow down and like let go of some of these responsibilities. And I did that. And it feels like, yeah, I'm really glad I did. But it's just interesting to me that to reflect that, yeah, like there's just been like multiple invitations from somewhere from my system over the past years that had a very strong theme of like less and more space and more slowly. So that's why I guess I feel like this continues to be a challenge, and also clearly like this has been the theme of allowing myself to like connect with some new like subtleties of my energy and of my being.
Hmm. Yeah, it feels like a fruitful exploration and something, at least for myself, I'll forget to slow down from time to time and remember. And it's like a fun cycle. And
Yeah.
it doesn't have to be perfect or solved forever. I can just like remember whenever I remember. And because, before just take a moment to stretch or breathe or and do some yoga or meditation or something. Um, yeah, just remember like I am a human animal and I can like relax regardless of any external whatever pressures in my environment or the structure of my life at the moment. There's still always time to take care of the body.
Yeah. And like I even kind of haven't quite spoken about it publicly yet, but there's like a way in which I connect that a bit to what's happening in the world right now, especially with AI development.
Hmm.
Like I've been having this strong sense that somehow like a part of my purpose feels like bringing more like feminine or like relational quality into the work setting as well. And I think specifically my interest is in like in the sphere of sort of like the culture of how we develop these new technologies, specifically AI, because it does feel like quite um goal oriented and quite like sort of linear and quite like, let's just like go at it. And I think I would really enjoy to somehow create a force that makes us like slow down and pause and reflect a little bit more in the process, because it is genuinely a technology that could be quite dangerous. And yeah, and so I've been wondering like how could we also bring that quality to like worldly pursuits, um because it feels like in my own life the way to like sort of notice that I was quite in like a lot of like unaware masculine energy. Like the way to notice that was to step into more slowing down to start with and starting to listen, so that we can find like the more like aware like masculine energy that wants to do things in the world in a wholesome way. And so I've really been wondering, like, okay, on a global scale, how do we like transform that unaware masculine energy that we build technology with into like a more aware masculine, informed by the aware feminine. So that's
Mm-hmm.
like my little like worldly inquiry around these topics.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really fascinating because one, like the people behind technology are, overwhelmingly male. And the technology right now is pretty disembodied. It's all on screens and devices. I mean, it might become more and more into hardware and real world objects later on, but right now it's, you're have a contracted awareness on the screen, you're trying to probably solve a problem or just like type the right thing to get the right other text or image or whatever it is.
Mm,
Um, yeah, all these are things that can lead like contracted awareness. And so I think it's
mm.
very, very noble having a desire to bring more like femininity and mature feminine into those spaces.
Yeah, but I guess like I also just feel like maybe studying polarities and the interactions between them and these like maturation patterns could actually be like a good reference point for like healing our work culture as well, which I think
Right.
I definitely would say that it is a bit broken. Or maybe I don't want to pathologize. Like it comes from like real things. Like just as we end up being contracted, like our work culture ends up being contracted because we create it, right? So there's like there's like a love and safety that's needed to like actually take a step back to reflect, because there's a lot of things at stake at work. But yeah, I've just been feeling like this possibility around studying some of these polarities and the patterns between them to like have some kind of inspiration, some kind of model for how we could also transform the work culture.
Mm-hmm. I wonder if you have any ideas, guess, hypothesis for like what a more healthy, integrated work culture might look like? Like, what would be different? What would have shifted for that to be achieved?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good question, a hard question, because I feel like I also am in process about this. Like my solution for me was, okay, I need to quit the system so I can fully understand how it's impacting me. That's like step number one. And through that, I was able to notice that, okay, when I step out of this culture, I am able to like reconnect with my creativity. I am able to like re-regulate myself and sort of like orient more towards like what I really care about. Um, and I'm now at a point where I'm considering re-stepping into that culture. Um, and there's some fear and there's some sense of like, just bringing like more emotions and people's feelings into workplace is not exactly the solution. Um, like what is that like different way of being that would actually help us feel more human at work and actually incentivize like sort of taking a step back more frequently than we do right now to check like are we actually on track, because I think often there's some incentives like investors invested their money and they want us to show results, or I'm a founder and like everyone relies on me to pay their like salaries. Like I cannot possibly just like completely pivot right now. So there are these like reasons that we have for not taking, enough time to check with like where is it going, what we're doing. But also like that seems to be, I think, necessary for achieving wholesome outcomes. So yeah, like I don't really have an answer, but I do feel like starting with bringing a bit more like relationality and a little bit more humanness into the workplace, so people can like actually check in with what's going on, and then
Mm.
giving them permission to speak about things that are not fully explicit and fully evidenceable, that are also just like intuitions and felt senses, that could like enrich the data in the workplace. Um, I'm just noticing my thoughts here are very scattered. So I
Sure.
guess the truth is like I don't know. I don't know, but I just feel like I have some hunches, and I also have been exploring this with a few people who also feel like yeah, just like bringing a little bit more like space for what people are going through could be like the first step, like being a little
Mm.
bit more authentic, essentially.
Yeah. One thing I'm thinking about is companies often look for like an edge or alpha, some like way to get an advantage over competitors. So if there's like some way to convince whatever investors or a founder or CEO of, hey, we're going to try to incorporate or fit into the structure here um, more intentionality, more like relationality, maybe a little slowness, and trusted like things that aren't usually measured, like worker, like employee happiness or relaxation. We're going to trust that somehow that's going to translate at some point later on before we run out of money into whatever
Yeah.
better, more revenue, profits, faster development cycle, whatever metrics
Right.
they care about. And just like, if someone's willing to take the chance on that more relateful, embodied mode of work culture, um, trust that there'll be
Mm-hmm.
some payoff later on somehow that can be measured.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's that trust, that's a really interesting thing here, because I'm just remembering the example I gave you earlier in the conversation of how I was doing this like somatic regulation exercise, just like looking up the ceiling, for 30 seconds, and no shift was coming to me. And yeah, and it's sort of like a microcosm for these bigger processes where you're an investor looking at a process and you're like, it's not yielding as fast as it should be. But like, but maybe like the whole system is in a bigger process that will yield like much better results if you just like let it unfold a little bit longer. But like time is money, so there's very little incentive to wait. Um, and so I feel like there's just like something there, um, yeah, around like trust, um,
Hmm.
and acknowledging that like real creative process is non-linear.
Yeah. I wonder if like curiosity is an element here too. Like, oh, I wonder, like I've worked in different places where speaking for some hypothetical CEO or founder, I've worked in places where there was this work culture and people burned out and it didn't work out. So what would happen if we prioritized slowness, intentionality,
Yeah.
relaxed and happy employees, better communication? What would happen? I want to find out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to scroll through a list of questions I have, just general ones for these conversations, and see which ones want to be asked right now.
Cool.
What are your favorite things about being a woman?
Hmm. Um, I notice I'm smiling and I don't know why, but there's something here. I think the thing that's coming up is uh like imagination. Um or like this very like rich ability to like dream and vision things. I think that is pretty cool.
Hmm. Hmm. And have you noticed that like that
I'm not
call?
saying men don't have that, by the way. I'm
Hmm.
not saying men don't have that, but it's just one of those things that I feel like I recovered when I started reconnecting with the feminine. So that was kind of interesting to me.
Hmm. Cool. Could you share a dream or vision that's been alive for you more recently?
Mm. Yeah, I'm dreaming about a home with my own space where I can roll around on the floor and be free.
Ah, would you host events or circles at this home?
Yes,
Yeah.
totally.
Hmm. And where do you think the home would be?
Yeah. Ah. The thing I know is that close to nature with some beautiful greenery around. I don't, my dream is not yet ready for a place.
Yeah, sounds lovely.
Mm-hmm.
How do you navigate societal expectations and pressures related to womanhood?
Oh, that's an interesting one because I feel like actually the worst expectations that I experience are the ones I impose on myself.
Mm,
So I think my work has mostly been around noticing where am I expecting myself to be some way and then letting go of that. Or maybe like understanding why it's there first, but sort of in the end, like being like, wow, okay, actually you don't need to do this, you don't need to be that way. So in a way, it's like removing expectations from my own system.
yeah. Where, like, I'm wondering how those expectations arise or come to be in the first place internally. Where do they come from?
Hmm, that's a great question. I would imagine it's not from one source. Um, like for example, right now I am trying to figure out my next plans, and I feel the sense that I should go home to Poland. And then there's the sense of like, who says you should? Like maybe there's a part of you that wants to. You could connect with that more and actually, and go there out of like this desire to go. Or maybe you're just imagining that your family expects you to go, but actually they don't. And in that case, what would you do? So I think that's like the process that I lead myself through. Like whenever there's a should, I'm like, okay, is there like a real wanting somewhere around here that I could tune into instead? Or that maybe I can just like uh, validate either by asking the person who I think has the expectations whether they do in fact have them, or just sort of like allowing myself to not follow the expectation.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. How can men help women feel safe in their bodies?
Give us a massage. It's
Hmm.
very simple. Just make us feel nice.
I really love that answer. Hmm. Yeah. Hmm. There might be a follow-up question here that wants to be asked. I'm just like sitting with this for a second.
Well, I have a
Um,
follow-up thing to say. Yeah, like I
Great.
guess I have a follow-up thing to say because I think that there's like a really big thing around consent that
Yeah.
I think is huge for safety. Like can you like, can you just actually like ask before you touch? Like can you talk a little bit more about how you're relating to me? Um, yeah, like and even when like offering touch, like checking in, like is this the touch that you want? Like I think, again, this is generalization, but I think it's hard often for women to like what they want or like upfront say yes or no. That's like really clear. And so like the more we are like like encouraged to check in with ourselves, I think that's just like really trust and safety building, at least for me.
Hmm. Yeah, it sounds like yeah, I think we talked about like slowness, intentionality, of course, like active listening and being able to like receive no's and like not pushing back on that around like touch and consent
Yeah.
feel crucial.
Mm.
I have three questions here from the last woman I spoke with on this podcast. Some of those we've already covered to some degree, but I'm just gonna ask all three, and you're welcome to discuss whatever feels alive there as a response for any of them. What are the ways that you connect with other women? How do you develop new social connections? How do you validate and verify other women?
Verifying. That's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
um, hmm. Yeah, it's an interesting question because I think recently I've become aware of a pattern um, where I I might connect with people who make me feel safe in some way because they are like not quite, maybe because they are also not quite like being fully themselves, and that means that I also don't really feel called to like be more of myself. And then there's people who I feel good around, but also they are like challenging in some ways. Like I feel like they're inviting me to like be more fully myself. And so recently I've been drawn to this question of like, yeah, like who are the women in my life or who are the women out there who I feel drawn to? Like I want to be around them. And also I'm a little bit like, oh yeah, and that's gonna be like that's gonna like require me to be more in my authenticity, expression, and my power, my boundaries. Um, and I think that's like what I'm recently seeing myself navigating towards, like wanting these strong connections where we both not so much like push each other, but just like encourage each other to, yeah, to fold in some of these parts that don't often get connected over. Um, yeah, and so that's been like a really interesting transition for me, like both noticing that pattern and then kind of choosing to follow the like a little bit more exciting and a little bit more like a risky path.
Mm. Yeah, does that it sounds like that might involve like going first sometimes, like being the one to be like courageous or
Yes.
vulnerable first. Yeah. I wonder what does that like look
Yeah.
like for you? How does that go?
Yeah. Yeah. I actually had a really interesting experience with a female friend recently where we were talking and I was getting myself excited and I wanted to like talk about some of the things that I've been exploring. And then I noticed that I started having these pretty strong feelings of like, am I taking too much space? Like, does she feel like she can share her theories with me? And then I named it. And yeah, that like unlocked a really beautiful conversation about how we were both feeling like sometimes making ourselves small, like with another woman, um, and how we don't want to do that. Um, and yeah, I feel like in the moment, it felt um, like I felt like sort of not very strong in sharing that because it felt like quite vulnerable. But now that I think about that moment, I'm like, oh yeah, no, actually, this is like me trying to like do the non-intuitive thing that I want to do more of, which is to
Hmm.
just like actually come out.
Hmm. A thread I've noticed, I think, throughout our conversation here has been like the power in taking something like internal, whether it's a desire, thoughts, like even
Mm.
observation, judgment, and just like naming it, expressing it, letting someone else hear it or witness it. And yeah, I just noticed that, and I just want to give a little room here to explicitly
Yeah,
mention that.
I like that. I like
Mhm.
that because I think that actually connects well to the first tweet you quoted. I think that was the first tweet about like how I've been wanting to now host more spaces for men and women. And I think
Mm,
actually maybe what I want to do in those spaces is something like that first. Like, can we just be a little bit more with our internal experience and witness it? I think that's
mm.
quite exciting for me.
Yeah. I mean, I'm curious to know like what that looks like. Is that just together, men and women just sharing their internal experience, or what's it like for them in the moment?
Yeah. I think there's probably many ways, but one that I have experimented with, uh, and I would like to run it again, was I teamed up with a male friend and we invited an equal number of men and women. And first we did like an opening circle, we connected a little bit with our bodies and kind of like down regulated. And then we went into separate like men and women groups where we had some discussions. And then we sort of came together to almost like share some emergings or some things that came up in these separate groups and like just practice witnessing each other without really trying to get into like debates or anything, but just be like, oh yeah, that is your experience, and that is your experience, and just like sitting with that. So that's something that I would really like to do again. It was really cool.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, it sounds really exciting. I like look forward to some awareness around developments there, whatever that looks like in the future. Yeah. What is a question you'd like to hear other women answer and discuss?
Mm. When do you feel powerful as a woman?
Hmm. I just love that question. Thank you for that. Um, part of me wants to ask you that right now. Would you like to answer that?
Okay. Um, ah, hmm, hmm, hmm. When I'm in my pleasure.
Hmm. Yeah, probably want to just like hope the podcast ends right there. But I do want to give a little space for if there's anything else you want to talk about or share that we hadn't gotten to discuss today. Love to give you the opportunity
Hmm.
to share that right now.
Well, I think I'm going to eat my own medicine
Hmm.
and share that I am in the attempt to listen to my body. I am starting to feel like my body's capacity has been reached. And I think there's nothing more that I would like to add. And I'm
Great.
looking forward to rolling around on the floor after this podcast.
I might do the same. Perfect. Yeah. Great note to end on here. Sandra, I'm just so grateful that you shared so many just ideas and experiences and frameworks with me and the audience. And just really happy to have gotten to know you during these like past few hours. So thank you for your presence and your receptivity to all my questions.
Mm, thank you. Yeah, I feel like I have learned some things about myself through this conversation. So I'm really grateful for your questions.
It's great. All right. Enjoy floor rolling and have a good rest of your day. Take care.